Right, let's round things off today with a look at The Dead. Drew, what is all that about?
Pathology is called, Scott.
Well, that'll wrap us up for today. Thank you.
Yes. Our last film was also John Huston's last, The Dead, as Scott says, an adaptation of a James Joyce short story, a part of his collection, The Dubliners. I can't say I was looking forward to watching this. A costume drama about upper middle class people in Edwardian Dublin, with a production quality looked very like a TV movie. I'm happy to report, though, that within minutes my scepticism had evaporated and I simply began enjoying it instead. I can't really tell you what it's about, because I'm not convinced that it's really about anything beyond the reflection in the final act that all things must pass, in juxtaposition with the life and vitality on show in the rest of the film. The main event is an epiphany party being held in a Dublin townhouse, where an extended family and some close friends have gathered, as they do every year, for the last celebration of the Christmas period. Nothing that passes is remarkable, but it's all very believable. People catch up, others fret about the food, opinions are exchanged about cultural events, and guests are called upon to recite poetry, or, in the case of one elderly aunt, step repeatedly on cats, even though everyone refers to it as singing. Must be a Catholic thing, I think, and I'm out of my element there. The characters and dialogue, while perhaps bordering on the pretentious at times, all seem generally likeable or interesting, and no one is too broad, even the nephew who likes alcohol far too much. The director, who shot this film from a wheelchair with an oxygen tube to his nose, managed to place his camera intimately amongst the guests, trusting more to his son Tony's script, really quite close to Joyce's text, than anything flashy or technical to put the audience amongst this warm, pleasant and often humorous setting. And really, that's almost all there is to it. But I don't want to diminish it by that. It was a very nice place to spend a while. As the party ends though, Angelica Huston's Greta hears one of the guests singing a song called The Lass of Aughrim. Fortunately, this singer was not the cat killer, but a man with a most pleasant voice. A song which strikes her heart and brings up memories of her dead teenage love. Memories which she later confides to her husband, Gabriel, in their hotel room. The film ends with her husband reflecting on this in voiceover. One by one, we're all becoming shades. Better to pass boldly into that other world, in the full glory of some passion, than fade and wither dismally with age. Comparing the future with the vital evening he's just enjoyed. Bit of a bummer, really, but touching nonetheless. That's it. It seems so slight, but I really liked it. I was even impressed by Angelica Huston's Irish accent, which was pretty near flawless. And for that I'm particularly grateful, as I'm always on edge when I know that an actor is going to attempt a Scottish or Irish accent, because it's rarely good. No such fears here though. Indeed, the only slightly dodgy sounding accents were genuine Irish actors who'd likely been living in England for a long time. Really, the only issue I had with The Dead was the voiceover at the end, largely because it didn't seem necessary for it to be framed as inner monologue. A very minor tweak to having Gabriel speaking instead to the sleeping Greta, and it's sorted. A final note on this, which to be clear I very much recommend, and that's to draw attention to the scene in which, for some reason, the hostess feels compelled to say to one guest about another that, to tell you the truth, she's basting the goose. This is not a euphemism I've heard before.
Aye. Well, it's always good to see Transporter Chief Miles O'Brien, isn't it?
Yes, I thought that too. I was like, oh, call me. It's a fairly early role for him.
He will only ever be Transporter Chief Miles O'Brien. Yes, I don't know. I didn't dislike The Dead, but I didn't really get a great deal from it. I didn't dislike anything that was going on. Like, all the characters are like, they feel very real and realistic, and all the dialogue makes sense, and none of it's particularly obnoxious, and all that kind of. It's easy enough to get through the first. I mean, that's pretty much an hour of the film there, and it's as sort of mildly entertaining. But I wasn't really getting anything more from it than mild entertainment, which is fine, I guess. And then the last kind of 20 minutes is where it tries to really rope-a-dope you with a bunch of emotional stuff, which comes largely out of nowhere. And for the most part, it's kind of effective. As you say, it seems like a film that is kind of marking time up to gets to the point where Gabriel has his monologue at the end, except it's not a monologue, it's in voiceover for no good reason whatsoever. Have you forgotten you're making a film? And I think there's... Yeah, as you say, if it had been tweaked slightly, this could have worked better. It is one of these things where I think maybe the actual adaptation of it from the short story needed a bit more work. I think this could have been a bit more like a film than, certainly that last 20 minutes, and that really kind of throws into stark relief, because that's where any of the point of this is, at least as far as I can discern. So it being a little bit kind of... God, you don't want to say lazy, given everything Huston went through to kind of try and direct this. Literally dying as he did it. But yeah, it seems very much like this should have been tweaked a little bit at the end. But obviously there's a lot of emotional resonance that it picks up just because of the circumstances under which it was made and what that last 20 minutes is about. And I can see why it's kind of effective on that level, but if you're trying to divorce that part of it from it as a film, it could have done with a bit more tweaking towards there. But I certainly wouldn't necessarily say that it's definitely not my favourite of these films. It's probably my least favourite of all the ones we've spoken about today. But which is not to say that I didn't like it, which is remarkable. How often do we say that when we actually get through one of these podcast episodes? I would still heartily recommend this to anyone who's a fan of the work. And there's lots of... there's lots of nice dialogue in it. It's a nice kind of calming film for the most part, and there's certainly a place for that in film canon. Yeah, it's all right, and I didn't get as much out of it as you clearly did, but I can see where you would get that kind of thing from it. So yes, still recommending it. Still give it a go. But for me, it's more at the bottom of this list.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favourite out of this lot. I really don't think it's about anything. But the dialogue at the end, some of it's quite touching, even without the context of John Huston basically dying as he was making this.
Yeah.
And the effect that had on his daughter who's working in the film with him.
Yeah.
It's like a touching idea there, and it's like I get the juxtaposition of like that following, because it was such a lively party. Not in terms of like people like being raucous or anything, just like it represented a lot of life, a lot of hope and just enthusiasm and things. But actually, I don't think it's got an awful lot to say. I found the film kind of like a warm bath.
Right.
I just enjoyed the setting. The people felt real and just like not just ridiculous stereotypes or like ridiculously broad characters. And I didn't necessarily think any character was particularly interesting or that there was particularly somewhere I'd want to be. The general humanity of it, it felt like real in a way you don't often see in film.
Yeah, it's a very warm film. Very, certainly all that kind of family stuff during the dinner party seems very real. It feels like a family that you could definitely see yourself being part of. And I think that's pretty universal, so that's always good to see.
And that sort of thing is quite hard to do, to have like a believable dynamic like that on screen, particularly with so many characters.
Yeah.
There's so many people, but it just felt nice.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I enjoyed about it. Just like it was a nice experience I had while watching it. And say that, like, touchy moments at the end and stuff just frustrated by general disregard for voiceover ever, because I think it's generally not a good idea. And in that, all I need to do is it needed 4 words changed.
Yeah.
At this beginning, so that it would appear that even if you carry on in voiceover with your images, the images, they kind of seemed a bit amateur at the end. That's the one thing I really didn't like.
Yeah.
I feel more TV than anything else, actually. But yeah, 4 words changed so that it at least appear that Gabriel was talking to Angelica Huston while she was asleep on the bed.
Yeah.
And it suddenly doesn't read as voiceover in the same way. Like, why? There's no other voiceover. But yeah, it was a lovely wee film. I enjoyed my time with it, that was all. Which is nice. And yeah, there's none of these films that I didn't like. I got something out of all of them. So as you say, yes, that's uncommon, and that is good.
Yes.
Not that it's uncommon, good that it's both managed to get so much out of it, or out of them. It's a nice thing indeed.